Hello. Hopefully you guys can hear me. My microphone on Facebook Lives has not been cooperating, so I hope this isn't coming across terrible and I won't know until I'm finished. However, it's been a minute and I wanted to hop on here from a coaching session that I had last week with somebody, and it's pretty insightful, so stick with me, and there might be something you can apply here as you look at your own numbers on what story they might be sharing with you. So let me condense this down as best as I can. I had challenged this person to come to our next meeting with each other. This was last week, with certain numbers from 2024. So they had their entire agent roster from 2024, and across the top of that were categories like total GCI that each individual agent had earned, the total closed volume that each individual agent had done, total closed units from each individual agent, and then finally, the fourth topic across the top was total company dollar, total company revenue from each individual agent. So when you see the breakdown from each person and then total it up, that represents obviously the total production for the year. But what we did is we broke it down into three sections. You got all the data, all the agents on the left, those four categories across the top, and then we put a space when we divided out who are the top 20%, the middle 60%, and then the bottom 20% sorted by production. Maybe you want to sort it by number of units closed. This individual had done it by total company dollar from those respective categories. So here's our findings. The top 20%, top 20%, represented 46.10% of the total GCI brought in. They did over, $23 million of total GCI, and that top 20% was responsible for 46% of that. That top 20% was also responsible for 46% of the total closed volume. Big brokerage, right? But they had over $886 million last year of total closed volume. The middle 60%, they were responsible for 37% of the total GCI. They were responsible for 37.46% of the total volume. And then finally, that bottom 20% was responsible for 16.85% of the total GCI and 16.21% of the total closed volume. Now, where am I going with this? One of the categories that stood out like a sore thumb is one that I have not shared yet. Total company dollar. Now, mind you, to follow along appropriately, this particular company is a capped commission model. They cap their agents on any 12-month cycle, and once they hit cap, they're earning 100% of their commission on the closings thereafter. So with that in mind, check this out. The top 20%, 46% GCI, 46% volume, 17% total company dollar. So how do you go from 46% to 46% and drop off a cliff to 17% of the total company revenue came from that top 20%? The middle 60%, 37% for GCI, 37% for volume, 45.52% for total company dollar, and finally, the bottom 20%, 16.85% total GCI, 16.2% total volume, but guess what? 37.45% came from that bottom 20% to the total company dollar. If we just zero in on that total company dollar column, the majority of the production comes from the top 20%, and yet the majority of the company revenue comes from the middle, and especially a significant chunk from the bottom 20%. What's my point? Why is this information important? Well, you can do a lot of good with this, especially, for example, how much time and attention and recognition are those top 20%ers getting? And they're deserving of, by the way, they are deserving of it. And yet we're giving so much time and attention to them, and maybe not enough time and attention to the middle, let alone the bottom 20%. And yet the middle and bottom 20% represent the lion's share, overwhelming lion's share, 83% to be exact, of the company revenue that is received. So my point is, and what created a great discussion just from numbers, what are we doing to love on and recognize that the middle? What are we doing to love on and recognize that bottom 20%? Because the fact is, all I could do is retain my top 20%, and everybody else feels lost, abandoned, isolated, unappreciated. You get the point, and they start leaving one, two every month. And all that revenue and all that company dollar and all that volume is heading out the door. But if all I'm doing is focusing on loving on the top 20% and making sure that they're taken care of and loved and appreciated, those are important. I'm not saying do less of that. What I'm saying is amplify or make sure the equivalent is also being done to everyone else. They're maybe not the squeaky wheels, but man, all of that volume, all that production added together from the middle 60% and the bottom 20% is significant. And so I know how easy it can be to not love on or recognize and appreciate that group and only focus on retaining and making sure the top 20% producers are happy. Numbers like this are very telling. So do this exercise for your brokerage if you haven't done something like this already. What do the numbers and the breakdowns of these production levels say? And how do your systems support not just the top, but especially the mighty middle and especially that bottom 20% who are nothing to bat an eye at? That is a significant amount of revenue and production still coming from the bottom 20%, so to speak. So hopefully this makes sense. Please let me know in the comments what you heard, what ahas maybe you got from this, and especially how important tracking and studying your numbers are.